Gwen Santos had always believed that love was something other people got to experience. The kind of fairy tale reserved for women who were thinner, prettier, more confident than she could ever hope to be. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror at the luxury hotel where she worked as a pastry chef, she smoothed down her white uniform and tried not to focus on the way her curves filled it out, the way her dark hair refused to stay perfectly pinned, the way her face seemed too round, too plain, too everything wrong and nothing right. The executive chef had just screamed at her for 15 minutes because a soufflé had fallen, and though it wasn't even her station, she had taken the blame anyway because that was what Gwen did. She made herself small, invisible, apologetic for taking up space in a world that had made it clear she was taking up too much of it. She wiped at the tears that threatened to spill and headed back into the kitchen, forcing herself to focus on the wedding cake she was decorating. 6 tiers of vanilla and raspberry, delicate sugar flowers that took hours to create, each petal so fragile it could crumble with the slightest pressure. Kind of like her, she thought bitterly, then pushed the thought away. Self-pity would not get this cake finished, and she had exactly 3 hours before it needed to be delivered to the ballroom. The kitchen was chaos, as it always was during events. Servers rushed in and out, sous chefs shouted orders. Something was burning on the far side of the room, and Gwen lost herself in the only thing she had ever been truly good at. Her hands moved with practiced precision, piping delicate rosettes along the bottom tier, adding tiny pearl details that caught the light. Baking had always been her escape, the one place where perfection was achievable, where following the rules meant success, where she could create something beautiful even if she could never be beautiful herself. She did not notice the man watching her from the doorway. Did not see the way his eyes tracked her movements, the small furrow between his brows, the way he seemed completely transfixed by something as simple as a woman decorating a cake. Vincent Xavier had come down to the kitchen to personally thank the chef for the meal his business partners had raved about during dinner, but he had forgotten entirely why he was there the moment he saw her. She was stunning. Not in the manufactured way of the women he usually met, the ones who looked like they had been assembled in a laboratory to appeal to men with money. No, this woman was real. Soft curves that moved as she worked, strong hands that created art from sugar and cream, a face that held such concentration and care that he found himself holding his breath, afraid to break whatever spell had been cast. There was something about the way she bit her lower lip when she was focused, the way a loose strand of hair kept falling across her cheek and she would brush it away with her wrist, the way she seemed completely unaware of her own grace. Vincent was not a man who believed in love at first sight. He was 32 years old, had built a hotel empire worth billions, had dated countless beautiful women, and had never once felt his heart do what it was doing right now. This was ridiculous. He did not even know her name. And yet he could not make himself leave, could not look away, could not stop his feet from carrying him further into the kitchen. Gwen sensed someone behind her and turned, nearly dropping her piping bag when she saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair that looked like he had been running his hands through it, sharp jaw. Eyes that were such a deep brown they were almost black. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and he was looking at her with an intensity that made her stomach flip and her face burn with embarrassment. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "The kitchen is staff only." "I know," Vincent said, and his voice was deep, rough around the edges in a way that sent shivers down her spine. "I own the hotel." Oh God, Gwen's mind raced. This was Vincent Xavier, the man whose face had been on the cover of Forbes magazine last month, who owned luxury hotels in 17 countries, who was probably about to fire her for existing too loudly in his presence. "I am so sorry," she stammered, setting down the piping bag and wiping her hands on her apron. "I did not mean to be disrespectful. I just thought you were one of the investors wandering around. I will get back to work. I am sorry." "Stop apologizing," Vincent said, and there was something gentle in his voice that made her look up at him in surprise. "You have nothing to be sorry for. I was just watching you work. That cake is incredible." Gwen glanced at the half-finished wedding cake and shrugged. "It is nothing special." "Just doing my job." "Nothing special," Vincent repeated, taking a step closer. "You just created a piece of art that will be the centerpiece of someone's wedding, something they will remember for the rest of their lives, and you call it nothing special?" She did not know what to say to that. Compliments were not something she had much experience with, especially not from men who looked like they had stepped out of a magazine spread. She was used to being invisible, to being the girl who people looked through rather than at. "What is your name?" Vincent asked, and the way he was looking at her made her feel like she was the only person in the entire kitchen, in the entire world. "Gwen," she said quietly. "Gwen Santos." "Gwen." He said it like he was tasting it, rolling it around in his mouth. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years, she answered, confused about why someone like him would care. "I started as an assistant pastry chef and worked my way up." 3 years, Vincent said, and something dark flickered across his face. "And I have never seen you before. That seems impossible." Gwen felt herself shrinking again, that familiar feeling of being too much and not enough all at once. "I mostly work early mornings or late nights. I am not usually here during dinner service." A timer went off across the kitchen and Gwen jumped, suddenly remembering where she was, what she was supposed to be doing. "I should really get back to this cake. The wedding starts in less than 3 hours. Vincent nodded, but he did not move. "Can I watch me decorate a cake?" Gwen asked, incredulous. "Don't you have billionaire things to do?" His laugh was unexpected, rich and warm and genuine. "Probably, but none of them are as interesting as watching you work," and so he stayed. Pulled up a stool and sat there while Gwen finished the cake, asking her questions about techniques and flavors, about how she had learned to bake, about what she loved about it. She kept waiting for him to get bored and leave, but he never did. He listened like every word she said mattered, like she was someone worth paying attention to. And it was so unfamiliar and so intoxicating that she found herself talking more than she had in years. She told him about growing up in a small apartment with her single mother, how they had baked together on weekends because it was cheaper than buying desserts, how she had fallen in love with the alchemy of turning simple ingredients into something magical. She told him about culinary school, about the loans she was still paying off, about her dream of maybe one day opening her own small bakery, though she said it with a self-deprecating laugh because dreams like that did not come true for girls like her. "Why not?" Vincent asked, his eyes serious. "Why can't you open a bakery?" "Because it takes money," Gwen said, putting the finishing touches on the top tier. "And I barely make enough to cover rent and student loans. It is just a silly dream." "It is not silly," Vincent said firmly. "Dreams are never silly, and money is just money. It can be found, borrowed, invested. What matters is the passion, the skill, the vision, and you have all of that, Gwen." She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that someone like him saw something in her worth investing in, worth believing in. But years of being told she was not good enough, not thin enough, not pretty enough, not special enough, had left scars that ran deep. The cake was finished. 6 perfect tears that would make a bride cry happy tears, and all Gwen could see were the tiny imperfections, the places where the frosting was not quite smooth enough, where a petal was slightly crooked. Vincent saw a masterpiece. "Have dinner with me," he said as she stepped back to survey her work. Gwen's head snapped toward him. "What, dinner?" Vincent repeated, standing up from the stool. "Tomorrow night. Let me take you to dinner." "Why?" The word came out before she could stop it, defensive and disbelieving. "Because I want to spend more time with you," Vincent said simply. "Because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since I walked into this kitchen. Because I want to know everything about you." Gwen's heart was hammering against her ribs. This had to be some kind of joke, some cruel prank. Men like Vincent Xavier did not ask women like her to dinner. They dated models and actresses and women who looked good on their arm at charity galas. "I don't think that is a good idea," she said, turning away to start cleaning up her station. "I am sure you have better things to do than waste time on me." Vincent moved before she could process it, stepping into her space, his hand gently catching her wrist. Not hard, not demanding, just enough to make her stop and look at him. "Look at me," he said softly, and she did, reluctantly dragging her eyes up to meet his. "Why do you do that? Why do you talk about yourself like you are not worth anyone's time?" "Because I am not," Gwen whispered, the words tasting like ash on her tongue. "You could have anyone." "Why would you want me?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his thumb brushing across her wrist in a way that sent electricity shooting up her arm. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I think you are perfect." The words hit her like a physical blow. She felt tears spring to her eyes before she could stop them, hot and shameful as they spilled down her cheeks. No one had ever said that before. No one had ever looked at her like she was something precious, something valuable, something worth wanting. "I am not," she choked out, trying to pull away, but Vincent held firm, his other hand coming up to cup her face with a gentleness that broke something inside her. "You are," he insisted, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "You are talented and passionate and kind and beautiful, and I think you are perfect, Gwen Santos. Even if you do not believe it yourself." She was crying in earnest now, years of pain and self-hatred pouring out of her in ugly, gasping sobs. Vincent pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like he could physically hold her together, and she let herself fall apart in the arms of a man she had known for less than 2 hours. The kitchen had gone silent around them. Other staff members had stopped to stare, but Vincent did not care. He just held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring soft reassurances that she could not quite make out over the sound of her own crying. When she finally pulled back, mortified and blotchy-faced, Vincent kept his hands on her shoulders, ducking his head to look into her eyes. "Dinner," he said again. "Please, give me a chance to show you how incredible you are." And even though every instinct told her to run, to protect herself, to not let herself hope, Gwen found herself nodding. Vincent's smile could have lit up the entire city. They exchanged numbers, and Gwen spent the rest of her shift in a daze, mechanically cleaning her station and going through the motions while her mind replayed every moment, every word, every touch. The other kitchen staff kept shooting her curious glances, but no one said anything. News traveled fast in a hotel, and by the time she clocked out at midnight, half the staff probably knew that Vincent Xavier had spent an hour in the kitchen watching her decorate a cake. She went home to her tiny studio apartment, to the place that always felt too small and too empty, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she let herself imagine something different, something bigger, something with Vincent in it. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Gwen went to work at 5 in the morning, prepped pastries for breakfast service, tried not to think about the fact that she had a date with a billionaire in 12 hours. She changed her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple black dress that at least did not make her look as large as she felt, applied makeup with shaking hands, and nearly canceled 3 times before Vincent texted her that he was downstairs. He took her to a restaurant on the top floor of one of his hotels, a place with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, where the wait list was 6 months long and celebrities dined in private booths. The hostess greeted Vincent by name, led them to a secluded table, and Gwen felt like an imposter in a world she did not belong to. But then Vincent started talking, really talking, and the restaurant faded away. He told her about growing up poor, about a father who drank too much and a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. He told her about working construction at 16, about saving every penny, about his first hotel that was more of a rundown motel that he had renovated with his own hands. He told her about the years of struggle, of failure, of people telling him he would never amount to anything. "I built this empire because I wanted to prove them wrong," Vincent said, his eyes distant. Every person who said I was not good enough, not smart enough, not worth investing in. I wanted to show them all, but the thing about success is that it is lonely. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and I come home to an empty penthouse every night. Gwen's chest ached. You could have anyone, she said softly. I am sure women throw themselves at you. They throw themselves at my money, Vincent corrected. At what I can give them, what I can buy them, what I represent. No one has looked at me like I was just a man in years. Except you. Last night in that kitchen, you did not care that I was Vincent Xavier. You just wanted me to leave so you could finish your cake in peace. Despite herself, Gwen laughed. I was terrified you were going to fire me. For what? Being extraordinary at your job. Vincent reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I meant what I said last night, Gwen. I think you are perfect, and I know you do not believe me yet, but I am going to spend every day proving it to you until you do. The dinner stretched into hours. They talked about everything and nothing, about dreams and fears, and the strange loneliness of feeling invisible in a crowded room. Vincent told her about hotel acquisitions and business deals, but also about his love of old movies and how he could not cook to save his life. Gwen told him about her mother who had passed away 2 years ago, about the grief that still hit her at unexpected moments, about the recipes she kept in a worn notebook that were written in her mother's handwriting. When Vincent finally drove her home, he walked her to the door of her building, and Gwen waited for him to expect something, to demand entry or a kiss or more. But he just brushed his lips across her forehead, so gentle it made her want to cry again, and told her he would see her tomorrow. Tomorrow turned into the next day, and the day after that. Vincent started showing up at the hotel kitchen during her shifts, bringing her coffee and sitting quietly while she worked. He took her to museums and parks and quiet cafes where they could talk without interruption. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, never made her feel like she owed him anything, never looked at her with anything less than complete adoration. 3 weeks in, Gwen finally let him kiss her properly. They were in his car after dinner, and she had been working up the courage all night, and when she finally leaned across the console and pressed her lips to his, Vincent made a sound low in his throat that sent heat pooling in her stomach. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like she was the most precious thing he had ever held, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I am falling in love with you, he whispered. I know it is too soon to say that, but I do not care. I am falling in love with you, Gwen. I am falling in love with you too, she whispered back, and it felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. 1 month became 2, then 3. Vincent introduced her to his business partners, to the handful of friends he trusted, and every time he introduced her as his girlfriend, Gwen felt a little more real, a little more like someone who deserved to be loved. He took her shopping and ignored her protests about prices, filling her closet with dresses and shoes that made her feel beautiful. He surprised her with weekend trips to his hotels in other cities, showing her the world she had only ever seen in magazines. But it was the quiet moments that Gwen treasured most. Vincent showing up at her apartment at midnight with takeout because he knew she had worked a double shift. Falling asleep on her tiny couch watching movies, his arms wrapped around her, her head on his chest. The way he listened when she talked about her dreams of opening a bakery, taking notes on his phone, asking questions about locations and business plans like it was the most important thing in the world. 6 months after they met, Vincent invited her to his penthouse for the first time. Gwen stepped off the elevator into a space that was bigger than her entire apartment building, all glass and steel and expensive art, and felt that familiar panic rising in her chest. This was his world. This was where he belonged. And she was just a pastry chef from a studio apartment who still could not quite believe any of this was real. Hey, Vincent said, catching her hand and pulling her toward him. I can hear you thinking from here. What is going on in that beautiful head of yours? I do not belong here, Gwen said, the words tumbling out. Vincent, look at this place, look at you, I am never going to fit into your life. You are my life, Vincent said fiercely. None of this matters without you, the money, the hotels, the success. It is all meaningless if I do not have someone to share it with, and I want to share it with you, Gwen, only you. He led her to the window, to the view that stretched out over the entire city, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. I bought this place because of this view, Vincent said softly. I thought if I could stand here and see the whole city, see everything I had built, I would feel accomplished, fulfilled, but I just felt empty, until you. Gwen turned in his arms, looked up at this man who had somehow seen past all her defenses, all her insecurities, straight to the heart of who she was. I love you, she said, simple and true. I love you so much it scares me. Don't be scared, Vincent whispered, his hands framing her face. I have got you, I will always have you. He kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise, and when he pulled back, there were tears on both their faces. I have something for you, Vincent said, taking her hand and leading her to his office. On his desk sat architectural plans, dozens of pages of drawings and specifications, and it took Gwen a moment to realize what she was looking at. Is this a bakery? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Your bakery, Vincent said. I had my architects draw up plans based on everything you have told me. 2 stories, the bottom floor for the actual shop and the top floor as a kitchen and your office. There is a location downtown that just became available, perfect foot traffic, and the owner is willing to sell. I know this is a big step, and I do not want you to feel pressured, but I believe in you, Gwen. I believe in your dream. Gwen stared at the plans, at the detailed sketches of industrial ovens and display cases, and a seating area with large windows. This was everything she had ever wanted, laid out in black and white, suddenly and impossibly within reach. I cannot let you buy me a bakery, she said, even as her heart was screaming yes, yes, yes. You are not letting me buy you a bakery, Vincent said patiently. I am investing in a business. You will own it, run it, make all the decisions. I am just providing the capital and you can pay me back once you start turning a profit. This is your dream, Gwen. Let me help you make it real. She looked up at him, at this man who had come into her life like a hurricane and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. Why? She asked. Why do you believe in me so much? Because you are extraordinary, Vincent said simply. Because you are talented and passionate and you deserve to have everything you have ever wanted. Because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life watching you succeed. The rest of my life. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication, with promise, with a future that suddenly seemed possible. Okay, Gwen whispered. Okay, yes, let's do it. Vincent's whoop of joy was so unexpected, so boyish, that Gwen could not help laughing as he picked her up and spun her around. This was real. This was happening. She was going to open a bakery, and the man she loved was going to be there every step of the way. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of construction and permits and recipe testing. Gwen gave notice at the hotel, and the executive chef who had screamed at her for a fallen soufflé nearly cried when she told him she was leaving. She spent 12-hour days at the bakery site, working with contractors and designers, arguing with Vincent about paint colors and lighting fixtures. He let her win every argument, which drove her crazy because she wanted him to push back, to have opinions, but he just kept saying it was her vision, her dream, her business. They moved in together a month before the bakery opened, and Gwen woke up every morning in Vincent's penthouse still half convinced she was dreaming. He would make her terrible coffee and burn toast and look so proud of himself that she did not have the heart to tell him it was awful. They would eat breakfast overlooking the city, making plans for the day, for the bakery, for the future. The bakery opened on a crisp October morning, and there was a line around the block before they even unlocked the doors. Vincent had somehow gotten a review in the city's biggest food magazine, and the word of mouth had spread like wildfire. Gwen stood behind the counter in her apron, her logo embroidered on the front, and felt like she might explode from happiness. Vincent was there, of course. He had taken the day off, which his assistant had said was unprecedented, and he spent the entire day helping however he could, clearing tables, refilling coffee, chatting with customers. He looked completely out of place in his expensive suit in her small bakery, but he also looked happier than she had ever seen him. That night, after they had locked up and counted the register and celebrated with champagne on the floor of the empty bakery, Vincent took Gwen's hand and pulled her to her feet. "I have one more thing for you," he said, and there was something nervous in his voice that made her heart start to race. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, and Gwen's breath caught in her throat. "Gwen Santos," Vincent said, dropping to one knee right there on the floor of her bakery. "You walked into my life 8 months ago and turned it upside down in the best possible way. You made me believe in love, in partnership, in building something real and lasting. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life proving to you how perfect you are. Will you marry me?" He opened the box, and inside was the most beautiful ring Gwen had ever seen. Simple, elegant, exactly what she would have chosen for herself if she had ever let herself dream that big. "Yes," she breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her, like everything in her life had been leading to this moment. He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with such tenderness that she felt her entire body melt into him. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I will love you for the rest of my life." "I love you too," Gwen whispered back. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for teaching me that I was worth loving." "Always," Vincent promised. "Always." They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the bakery, surrounded by friends and family and the smell of fresh bread and pastries. Gwen wore a simple white dress that made her feel beautiful, and Vincent could not stop crying through his vows, which made everyone else cry, which made Gwen laugh through her own tears. Their wedding cake was 6 tiers of vanilla and raspberry, with delicate sugar flowers that caught the light. The same cake Gwen had been decorating the night they met, recreated with love and care and the knowledge that everything had changed in that moment. Vincent fed her a bite, and she fed him one back, and when they kissed as husband and wife, the entire bakery erupted in applause. 1 year after the bakery opened, Gwen was pregnant with their first child. She worked up until the day she went into labor, much to Vincent's constant worry, and gave birth to a healthy baby girl they named Grace, after Gwen's mother. Vincent held his daughter with tears streaming down his face, looking at Gwen like she had hung the moon and stars. "You gave me everything," he whispered. "A family, a home, a reason to want to be a better man. How can I ever thank you for that?" "You already did," Gwen said softly, exhausted but happy. "You taught me how to love myself. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." 2 years later, they had a son they named William. The bakery had expanded to 3 locations across the city, and Gwen had published a cookbook that became a bestseller. Vincent had stepped back from the day-to-day operations of his hotel empire, choosing instead to spend more time at home with his family, to coach his daughter's soccer team, to be present in a way his own father never had. They bought a house in the suburbs with a big backyard for the kids to play in, though they kept the penthouse for when they wanted a night alone in the city. Vincent would come home from work to find Gwen teaching Grace how to make cookies, flour everywhere, both of them laughing, and he would stand in the doorway and marvel at the life they had built. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Vincent surprised Gwen with a trip back to the hotel where they had met. They left the kids with Vincent's mother and spent the weekend acting like they were dating again, holding hands, stealing kisses, staying up too late talking about everything and nothing. On their last night, Vincent took Gwen down to the kitchen late at night when it was empty and quiet. The night chef had left out ingredients and tools, and Vincent pulled Gwen toward the same station where she had been decorating a wedding cake the night they met. "I want you to teach me," he said. "I want to learn how to do what you do." "You want to learn how to bake?" Gwen asked, incredulous. "You can barely make toast without burning it." "I want to learn everything about you," Vincent corrected. "I want to understand what you love about this. And I want to be able to make our kids' birthday cakes with you instead of just watching." So Gwen taught him. Showed him how to measure flour and cream butter and sugar together, how to pipe frosting and create flowers from fondant. He was terrible at it, just as bad as she had expected, but he tried so hard and looked so proud of his lopsided cupcakes that Gwen fell in love with him all over again. "I think you are perfect," she said suddenly, echoing the words he had said to her all those years ago. Vincent looked up from the cupcake he was destroying with too much frosting, and his eyes went soft. Yeah, Gwen said, moving to wrap her arms around his waist from behind. "You are exactly who I needed exactly when I needed you. You saved me, Vincent. You taught me that I was worth saving." Vincent turned in her arms, pulling her close. "You saved yourself," he said firmly. "I just had the privilege of being there to watch. You are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I have ever known, Gwen Xavier. And I will spend the rest of my life grateful that you walked into my life and changed everything." They kissed there in the empty kitchen, in the place where everything had started, and Gwen thought about how far they had come. From that scared, broken girl who did not believe she deserved love to this woman who had built a life beyond her wildest dreams. Not because of Vincent, but because he had helped her see herself the way he saw her, as someone worthy of love, of respect, of every good thing life had to offer. Their children grew up surrounded by love and laughter and the smell of fresh baking. Grace inherited her mother's talent for pastry and her father's head for business, and by the time she was 16, she was already making plans to expand the bakery into a full restaurant. William was quieter, more thoughtful, content to help his father with hotel renovations and dream about becoming an architect. Vincent and Gwen grew old together, their love deepening and strengthening with each passing year. They had their fights, their moments of frustration and misunderstanding, but they always came back to each other, always remembered what they had built together. On their 25th anniversary, they renewed their vows in the same bakery where they had gotten married, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and a lifetime of memories. "I think you are perfect," Vincent said in his vows, and Gwen cried just like she had the first time he said those words, because even after 25 years it still meant everything to hear it. "I think you are perfect too," Gwen said back, holding his hands tight. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me. Always," Vincent promised, the same word he had said all those years ago in his penthouse. Always and forever, and it was. They had decades together, building businesses and raising children and creating a legacy of love that would outlast them both. When Gwen looked back on her life, on the scared girl in the hotel kitchen who did not believe she deserved to be loved, she barely recognized her. That girl had become a successful businesswoman, a devoted mother, a beloved grandmother, and the wife of a man who had never stopped looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Vincent Xavier had walked into her life and said 3 words that changed everything. "I think you are perfect." And even though it had taken time, even though the journey had not always been easy, Gwen had finally learned to believe him. Not because he was a billionaire who could give her anything she wanted, but because he had given her something far more valuable. He had taught her how to see herself through eyes of love instead of criticism, how to believe she was worthy of good things, how to build a life based on passion and partnership rather than fear. They had built that life together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. And as Gwen sat in her bakery at 70 years old, watching her granddaughter learn to pipe frosting the way she had taught her, with Vincent reading the newspaper in the corner and smiling every time she caught his eye, she knew without a doubt that she had lived a life worth living. A life filled with love and laughter and the sweet taste of dreams coming true. And it had all started with a billionaire walking into a kitchen and seeing a woman that everyone else had overlooked. Seeing not just what she was, but what she could become. Seeing her as perfect when she could not see it herself. That was the gift Vincent had given her. Not money or success or material things, but the gift of truly being seen. And that, Gwen knew, was the most precious gift of all.